Have you ever felt like you're changing in ways you didn't expect? Not just your body, but something deeper. Your rhythms, your thoughts, your habits. Like the tide slowly pulling back from the shore. You begin to notice little things slipping away. Some bring relief. Others leave a quiet ache. No one told you about this part. They spoke of retirement, of rest, of the golden years. But they rarely mentioned the inner shift. The subtle behaviors that sneak into your days. When you enter your 70s and 80s. You don't wake up one morning and feel old. It doesn't happen all at once. It's gradual, soft, almost invisible to others. But you feel it, deep in your bones and in your heart. There are things people in their 70s and 80s begin to do. Not because they've given up, but because life has reshaped them gently and quietly. And yet, no one really talks about them. Not because they're shameful, but because they're personal, tender, vulnerable, too sacred to casually mention at the dinner table. So many seniors carry these changes alone, wondering if they're the only ones who avoid the mirror in the morning, say no to invitations they secretly wish they could say yes to, feel invisible in a world that no longer waits. But let me tell you this, if you feel these things, you're not broken. You're not alone. You're simply human, and perhaps more alive than you've ever been. Because there's something sacred about this stage of life. Something no one teaches in school or writes in a manual. It's a quiet knowing, a kind of spiritual unfolding. The things we'll talk about today may sound unpleasant at first, but they're not bad. They're just part of the truth that comes with aging. A truth that can be hard to speak aloud, but one that deserves to be honored. Because once we name these things, they lose their power to isolate us. They become shared experiences. They become wisdom. So if you're listening to this, and you felt a shift you couldn't quite put into words, this is for you. If you've noticed that time feels both slower and more precious. If you've begun to prefer silence over small talk. If you've ever felt the ache of being forgotten, even while smiling in a room full of people, then stay with me. We're going to explore 10 quiet, sometimes painful truths that many people begin to live silently in their 70s and 80s. And with each one, I hope you feel less alone, more seen, and gently reminded that even in this stage of life, there is beauty, grace, and quiet courage. This isn't a list of fear. It's an invitation to pause, to reflect, to speak honestly with your own soul. Because these years, your years, still matter deeply. Let's begin. 1. Avoiding mirrors. Have you ever caught your reflection and looked away? Not because you didn't recognize yourself, but because a part of you did, and it was too much. This is something few talk about, but many quietly begin to do it in their 70s and 80s. They start avoiding mirrors. Not all mirrors, not dramatically, just little by little. Brushing your teeth with your eyes lowered. Walking past the hallway mirror without turning your head. Choosing to sit where you won't accidentally see yourself in the window at night. It's not vanity. It's grief. A soft kind of grief for time. Because when you look into a mirror at this age, you don't just see your face. You see everything. You see who you used to be. The strength you carried in your shoulders. The light in your eyes that once had no shadows beneath them. The smoothness of skin you never appreciated when it was there. You see every year you've lived, etched gently across your cheeks, your jaw, your neck. Each line a story, each wrinkle a memory. And still it's hard. There is something jarring about realizing that the face the world sees today no longer matches the image you carry in your heart. That girl who once danced barefoot in the grass. That man who once fixed everything with his hands and a quiet grin. They're still in there. But the mirror doesn't always show them. And so, many choose not to look. They turn away, not out of shame, but out of tenderness. Because the person in the mirror feels like both a stranger and a dear old friend. And when you look too long, you remember too much. You remember the moments when you felt beautiful. Not in a glamorous way, but in a whole way. You remember the strength in your legs. The clarity in your voice. The sparkle in your laughter. And sometimes that remembering aches. Not everyone understands this. Younger people think mirrors are just for checking appearances. But as you grow older, they become windows into time. Sometimes Looking at yourself means facing the things you've lost. Not just youth, but the rhythm of days that once felt endless. That's why this quiet habit, this avoiding of mirrors, often begins without notice. Not out of self-rejection, but self-preservation. And if this is you, please know, you are not alone. Many elders, wise, kind, deeply lived souls, quietly turn their gaze elsewhere. Not because they dislike who they are, but because who they are cannot be captured in glass. Because the mirror doesn't show the love you've given. It doesn't show the nights you spent comforting others, or the quiet sacrifices no one noticed. It can't reflect the wisdom in your soul, the resilience in your heart, the laughter lines that were earned through joy and survival. It shows skin and hair and posture, but it does not show essence. So if you've stopped lingering in front of mirrors, it doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It might mean you've started caring differently. You've begun measuring your worth, not by reflection, but by memory, not by appearance, but by meaning. And perhaps, in a way, that's a kind of freedom. Still, there is one thing I gently ask of you, if you'll allow it. Don't be afraid to look not just at your reflection, but through it. Behind the softness of your gaze, behind the curve of your smile, there is a story that deserves to be seen. Not by others, by you. You are still here. You are still beautiful in the way only life can make someone beautiful. With depth, with strength, with quiet grace. So if one day you pass a mirror, pause, not to judge, not to compare, but to honor, to say, I see you. You come so far, and you are still becoming. Because even now, especially now, you deserve to be seen, even if just by your own eyes. 2. Repeating the same memories. Have you ever caught yourself telling the same story? Again? Maybe at the dinner table. Maybe during a phone call. Maybe to someone who's already heard it before more than once. And as soon as the words leave your mouth, you wonder, have I already said this? And sometimes you feel a bit embarrassed. You smile, maybe laugh it off, and the person listening nods politely, kindly. But inside, a quiet thought lingers. Am I starting to slip? Let me gently stop you there. What if I told you this habit isn't about forgetting? What if, in fact, it's about remembering? You see, as we grow older, the mind begins to treasure memories the way the heart treasures old letters. Carefully, lovingly, and often. And just like someone rereading a favorite book, your heart pulls out certain chapters again and again. Not because you've forgotten the ending, but because those moments meant something. Deeply. Repeating the same memory isn't always a sign of confusion. It's often a sign of connection. A memory calling out from your soul, saying, don't let this one be lost. You speak about your childhood home, the warmth of your mother's kitchen, the smell of bread baking, or the sound of rain tapping the windows as you read your first novel. You talk about your wedding day, or a train ride across the country, or a time you stood by the ocean, young and unafraid. And yes, you've said it before. But that doesn't mean it's any less true, any less beautiful. Because here's what few understand. As we age, time begins to move differently. The days ahead become shorter. And so we turn toward the long road behind us, searching for the places where our soul felt most alive. You're not just repeating stories. You're reliving something precious. You're letting your spirit drink once more from the wells that shaped you. And yes, people may get impatient. They may say, you've told me that already. But what they don't see is the why behind it. They don't feel how much you missed that moment. How that memory holds something no photograph ever could. Sometimes we speak of the same things, because they're the only things left that feel real. Because the world is moving so quickly, and those old memories remind us of who we are, who we've always been. So the next time you find yourself repeating a memory, don't apologize. Pause, smile, and share it with heart. Because those who truly care won't just hear your words. They'll feel the weight of the life behind them. And if they're wise, they'll know this story isn't just being told. It's being offered, like a soft flower pressed between the pages of time. And to those of you listening, really listening, when someone older tells you the same story for the 5th or 6th time, don't correct them. Don't rush them. Lean in. Let them speak. because that memory is the bridge between who they were and who they still are. And if you're the one repeating, if a memory keeps rising to your lips, that's not something to hide. That's something to honor. You're the living archive of your own life. And each time you share a story, you leave a trail for others to follow. A whisper from the past, reminding the present that it all mattered. So say it again, and again, and again, until the memory feels full, until your heart feels heard. Because some stories don't fade. They echo, they return, they bloom again and again, like the scent of old roses in the morning sun. And that, dear soul, is nothing to be ashamed of. It's a gift. 3. Letting go of long friendships. Silently. There's a kind of goodbye that makes no sound. No doors slammed. No harsh words. No dramatic final phone call. Just silence. A quiet space where a friend used to be. And in your 70s or 80s, you may begin to notice that space growing gently, painfully, inevitably. Friendships you once cherished begin to fade. Not because of anger, not because of some sudden betrayal, but because life has changed its rhythm and some people no longer walk at your pace. You stop calling as often. They stop calling too. You remember birthdays, but maybe don't send a card. They forget yours, but still smile when they think of you. At first, you tell yourself it's just a busy season. A few missed calls, a few weeks without contact, but weeks become months. And slowly, that once vibrant connection becomes a memory, not a presence. You let go without even realizing you're doing it. It happens when the energy it takes to maintain becomes greater than the peace you feel when you don't. And for many, this is one of the most tender, unspoken parts of growing older. The quiet unraveling of once important ties. You see, when you were younger, friendship was woven into the very fabric of your life. Late-night conversations, Sunday coffees, years of children growing up together, side by side. Friendship was laughter and shared secrets, weddings and hospital visits, birthdays and funerals. But as time passes, people move, not just physically, but emotionally. Their lives take different turns. New obligations, new family roles, changing health, shifting priorities. And even though the bond may still be there in spirit, the closeness starts to wither from lack of tending. You may notice that some people you once loved deeply simply don't fit into your present life anymore. They speak a language your heart doesn't speak these days. They chase things you've stopped chasing. They carry energy that no longer matches yours. And the saddest part is, there's often no closure, no conversation, no end, just absence. And yet, you still think of them. A song plays, and their face appears. You pass a familiar cafe, and remember laughing there together. You catch yourself smiling at the memory of a joke only the two of you would understand. And in those moments, you don't grieve the person. You grieve the closeness, the season that is now complete. Letting go of friendships in this way feels strange, because nothing went wrong, and yet everything has changed. And many people your age begin to carry this unspoken ache, a feeling of drifting, of loving from afar, of learning to hold gratitude for what was, instead of clinging to what no longer is. So if you're feeling this now, if certain friendships have faded, and your heart sometimes aches at the loss, please know, this too is part of the path. It doesn't mean you're failing at connection. It means you're evolving. You're honoring the energy you have left. You're choosing quiet over noise. You are allowing some chapters to close, so your soul has space to breathe. And maybe, just maybe, those friendships did what they came to do. They carried you through the storm. They held you during years that needed holding. They walked with you until the path began to fork. And now, they rest in memory. Let that be enough. Letting go silently does not mean you love any less. It means you love with acceptance, with grace, with open hands. So today, if someone crosses your mind, someone you no longer speak to, send them peace in your heart. That's enough. Because sometimes the deepest form of love is letting someone go gently, without bitterness, without blame, and with a quiet, enduring thank you. 4. Declining invitations you secretly wish you could accept. It begins with a simple phone call. Would you like to come by for dinner next week? There's a concert in the park. We thought of you. We're getting the old group together. You should come. And maybe you smile. You say something polite. Maybe you even picture yourself there, laughing, enjoying part of it all. But then almost without thinking, you say, I'll have to see. Or gently, maybe next time. And then you hang up the phone and feel a quiet sadness settle in your chest. You didn't say no because you didn't want to go. You said no because a part of you wasn't sure if you could. This is one of the things that few people understand. That as you grow older, you begin to decline invitations. Not out of disinterest, but out of self-protection. Because what used to be easy, putting on shoes, driving across town, sitting through long conversations, now takes thought, planning, energy, sometimes even courage. The truth is, your heart may still say yes, but your body whispers not today. And so, slowly, quietly, without telling anyone, you begin to retreat. You stop attending gatherings. You say no to the birthday lunches, the community events, the long phone calls. Not because you don't care, but because even things you used to love now come with a cost. There's the fear of being too tired, too stiff, too forgetful. The anxiety of needing help and not wanting to ask. The silent worry. What if I become a burden? So you choose comfort, familiarity, safety. You stay home. And at first, it feels like relief. But over time, it begins to feel like absence. The world moves on without you, gently but unmistakably. You watch from the edges, still invited, still loved, but no longer present. And the ache? It's not about missing the event itself. It's about missing the version of you who would have said yes without hesitation, who would have laughed freely, who wouldn't have had to think twice about stairs or parking or how late it might go. Sometimes, the worst part isn't saying no. It's not being able to say yes. So many in their 70s and 80s begin to feel this quiet grief, this gentle shrinking of their world. And no one sees it, because on the outside, it looks like a simple, polite decline. But inside, there's a longing, not just for events, but for belonging. If you felt this, if you've turned down something you truly wanted to do, because your body or your energy or your fears held you back, please know, you're not alone. So many carry this unspoken sorrow, and yet they do it with grace. But here's something I want you to hear and hold close. Saying no does not make you less. It does not make you forgotten. It does not erase your place at the table of life. There is deep wisdom in knowing your limits. There is quiet strength in honoring your body, even when your spirit wants to dance. And still, there may be ways to say yes, even now. A shorter visit, a chair by the door, a quiet cup of tea with one friend instead of 10. Connection does not need noise or crowds or full calendars. It only needs presence in whatever form you can offer. And if you must decline again tomorrow, do it with peace. Because the beauty of being older is that you no longer have to prove yourself by being everywhere. You've already been many places. Now, your presence carries weight, even in absence. So let go of guilt. Let go of shame. You are not missing out. You are moving gently with life as it is now. And that is more than enough. 5. Feeling invisible in a world that moves too fast. There comes a point, a quiet, aching moment, when you begin to wonder if anyone sees you anymore. Not just notices you, but sees you, the way people once did. You walk into a shop and no one greets you. You sit in a waiting room and the receptionist talks over you. Not to you. You say something in a family gathering, and your voice is drowned out by laughter, stories, noise, and you begin to feel it, not all at once, but slowly, like fog rolling in across a familiar landscape. Your edges begin to blur. This is the quiet invisibility that often visits in our 70s and 80s. Not because we become less valuable, but because the world around us has become too fast to notice. Everyone is rushing, scrolling, typing, talking, but not listening. And in all that speed, people stop looking at the faces that carry the deepest wisdom. You may find yourself repeating a question in a store, only to be answered with a sigh. You might offer advice to someone younger, only to be told, times are different now. It stings, not because your ego is bruised, but because your presence, your lived experience, deserves to be heard. You've been through wars and weddings, heartbreak and healing. You've raised families. You've buried loved ones. You've known the kind of joy that brings tears and the kind of loss that changes the shape of your soul. But somehow, in this fast-paced world, that doesn't always seem to count anymore. And yet, here you are, still breathing, still learning, still feeling everything. So what do you do with that ache? That sense that you become a background character in your own story? You begin first by honoring it, because it is real. Feeling invisible is not a weakness. It's a symptom of a society that has forgotten how to slow down and sit at the feet of its elders. But your worth is not determined by their awareness. Your value does not depend on who notices you in the supermarket or how many likes your photo gets. You are not fading. You are refining. In many traditions, spiritual, indigenous, ancient, elders were seen not as old, but as sacred, not as retired, but as keepers of the fire. They were the ones who sat in the circle and spoke last. Because when they spoke, everyone listened. Maybe the modern world has forgotten that, but you don't have to. You can begin to reclaim your space quietly. Look in the mirror, even if only for a moment, and remind yourself, I have lived. I matter. My presence is powerful, even if unseen. And if you feel brave, start speaking a little louder, not with force, but with certainty. Start telling your stories again. Start offering your perspective without waiting to be asked. Start writing things down, recording memories, passing on your truth. Because even if the world seems too loud to listen, there is someone out there, a grandchild, a neighbor, a stranger, who needs what you carry. You're not a ghost. You're a lighthouse. You are not fading. You are glowing in a frequency that only the wise can hear. So the next time you feel invisible, close your eyes and remember, you are seen by time, by memory, by the generations that came after you, even if they don't yet understand it. And most of all, you're seen by your own soul. And that, my dear friend, is the deepest kind of visibility there is. 6. Hiding pain so others won't worry. Written with tenderness, truth, and quiet depth. Around 4,000 characters in length. 6. Hiding pain so others won't worry. There's a kind of strength you don't get applause for. It's not the strength of lifting something heavy or pushing through loud, heroic battles. No, this kind of strength is silent. It's the strength of waking up with pain and saying nothing. It's the strength of smiling when your joints ache, when your back won't let you stand straight, when your heart carries a sadness that no one sees. Many people in their 70s and 80s begin to carry their pain quietly, not because they want to suffer, but because they don't want others to suffer. They say, I'm fine, even when they're not. They say, don't worry about me, even when they're scared. They laugh at the right times, change the subject, hide the wince. Why? Because they've spent a lifetime protecting others. And that habit doesn't just go away. You raised children through fevers and scraped knees. You worked through exhaustion. You helped others when no one helped you. You kept going again and again. Not because you felt strong, but because you knew you had to be. And now, even as the body grows tired, even as the nights feel longer, you still feel the need to appear okay. Because you don't want to be a burden. That word, burden, hangs so heavy in the hearts of many elders. So you keep things to yourself. You dismiss the pain in your hip. You hide the tears that sometimes come for no reason. You downplay the fear when your hands tremble or your memory slips. You tell your children, don't worry, sweetheart, it's just age. But inside it's hard. And here's the truth you might need to hear today. You do not have to hide. Your pain, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, is not a shameful thing. It is a human thing. And the people who love you, they don't want your silence. They want your truth. Because even though you've always been the strong one, even though you've always been the one who makes everything okay, it's okay to need comfort now. It's okay to say, I'm hurting, to say, I'm tired today, to ask for a hand to hold. Not because you can't go on, but because you shouldn't have to go on alone. Sometimes the most powerful thing an elder can do is show that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It teaches others how to care, how to slow down, how to see beyond the mask. And it gives you permission to finally exhale, to set down the heavy bag you've carried for so long, to say, today, I need gentleness, and to receive it without guilt, because you have given so much. You have earned rest. You have earned softness. You have earned the right to feel all that you feel, without explaining it away. So if you've been hiding your pain, if you've been swallowing your truth just to keep others from worrying, let today be different. Let this be your quiet permission to speak gently to yourself, to whisper, I'm allowed to ask for comfort. I am allowed to be held, the way I have held others for years. And know this, your pain does not make you a burden. It makes you real. It makes you human. And you are still worthy of love, not in spite of your pain, but even more because of it. 7. Downsizing dreams without realizing it. There's a moment, quiet and unannounced, when your dreams begin to shrink. Not because you no longer care, not because you've given up, but because life, little by little, teaches you to adjust. You stop making long-term plans. You stop saying someday. You stop reaching for the far horizon. Instead, you begin to dream in smaller circles. I just want to sleep through the night without pain. I'd like to visit the park again, if my knees allow it. Maybe I'll finish that book one day. And without realizing it, you start folding your hopes into smaller, quieter pockets. Ones that feel safer, less risky, more realistic. It makes sense, because by the time you reach your 70s or 80s, you've lived through enough disappointments to know how heavy hope can become. When it doesn't go your way, you've learned that flights get canceled, that plans fall through, that bodies don't always cooperate. So you begin to lower the bar, not out of weakness, but out of a kind of wisdom born from experience. But here's something to pause and consider. At what point did you stop dreaming big? Not because you wanted to, but because you believed you no longer could? It's a question few dare to ask, because society tends to send quiet messages to older people. Stay safe, stay still, stay practical. And so we start to say things like, that's not for me anymore. I'm too old for that. I have my time. But who told you your time was over? Who decided that the joy of becoming, of imagining, of reaching, had an expiration date? Dreams change with age, yes, but they don't have to disappear. They don't always have to be grand or glittering. Sometimes a dream is simply walking to the corner without pain. Sometimes it's learning something new, a song, a poem, a language. Sometimes it's writing down your story so that your grandchildren will know who you truly are. And sometimes it's daring to plan something beautiful, even now, because hope is not just for the young. It belongs to anyone who still has breath in their lungs and a flicker of desire in their heart. You may no longer want to climb mountains, but you can still plant gardens. You can still write letters. You can still begin something new, even if it's small, even if it's only for yourself. And yes, your dreams may look different now. They may come with more limitations, more caution, more slowness. But let me tell you something with all the softness I have. A dream delayed is not a dream denied. And even the gentlest dreams, a meaningful conversation, a walk with someone you love, a project made with your hands, can bring just as much joy as the wild ambitions of youth. So if you've noticed that your dreams have quietly downsized, that the color has faded from your vision of the future, I invite you, gently, to dream again, not for the sake of productivity, not to prove anything, but to remind yourself that you're still alive, still becoming. Take one small dream and bring it close. Water it, give it light, and see what grows. Because no matter your age, the soul still wants to stretch, to imagine, to wonder what's next. You don't need to conquer the world. You just need to believe that something beautiful still waits for you, just a little further down the path. And the path, dear soul, is still yours to walk. 8. Talking less, but feeling more. There comes a time in life when words begin to feel heavy, not because you have nothing to say, but because you've said so much already. You begin to talk less, not out of shyness, not from confusion, but from a quiet sense that not everything needs to be spoken anymore. In your younger years, you may have filled every silence with sound, jokes, opinions, stories, arguments. You spoke to be understood. You spoke to connect. You spoke because the world seemed to reward those who spoke the most. But as you grow older, you start to feel something shift. You begin to sense that the most important things, the truly important things, are often felt more than said. You watch a sunset and say nothing, because nothing you say could improve it. You sit beside someone you love, and the silence between you feels more comforting than conversation. You notice that your responses are shorter, slower, but your heart is louder than ever. This is one of the quiet truths of aging. You begin to feel more, while saying less. You walk into a room and instantly sense the energy. You hear a piece of music and feel it down to your bones. You look at someone's eyes and know exactly how they're doing, even if they haven't said a word. You begin to carry the emotions of others like they're your own. You cry more easily, not always from sadness, but from beauty too. A kind gesture, an old photo, a memory that catches you off guard and fills your eyes before you can blink the tears away. Your empathy grows, your intuition deepens, and suddenly you find yourself sitting in a world that moves too quickly, feeling things that others don't seem to notice. And still, you don't always speak, because you've learned that words are precious, that timing matters, that listening is often more powerful than responding. And sometimes you don't speak because you don't want to explain anymore. You don't want to justify why something matters to you. You don't want to waste energy trying to be understood by those who don't yet know how to listen. So instead, you sit in the warmth of your own understanding. You speak when it feels right, and when it doesn't, you simply feel. But here's something beautiful. Just because you speak less doesn't mean you've faded. In fact, your silence has begun to carry weight. People may not always know it, but when you speak, they lean in. Because there's something in your voice now. Stillness, depths, knowing. That only comes with time. You've earned that voice, even when you choose not to use it. And if the world sometimes forgets to ask how you're feeling, if the room is too loud, too rushed, too distracted to notice your quiet presence, know this: the way you feel, all that depth, that intuition, that sensitivity, is not a weakness. It is the wisdom of a soul that has loved deeply, lost bravely, and lived fully. You may not always say it out loud, but you carry whole libraries in your silence. And those who truly see you will know how to read between the lines. So talk when you wish, be still when you need, because even in your silence, you're speaking volumes. 9. Cleaning closets and preparing quiet goodbyes. One afternoon, you open a closet door. You run your hand across the clothes, and without thinking much, you begin to take a few things down. That sweater you haven't worn in years. The shoes that once carried you across busy streets. A box of letters, yellowing with time. You sit on the edge of the bed, quietly sorting through your life. Not because anyone told you to, but because something inside whispers, it's time. This is one of the quietest, most sacred things people begin to do in their 70s and 80s. They begin letting go, not dramatically, not in sadness, but with a gentle, almost spiritual tenderness. They begin cleaning closets, drawers, shelves, not just to tidy up, but to prepare, not for death, necessarily, but for peace, for order, for lightness. They begin to choose what will remain, and what no longer needs to stay. You may notice it in yourself. A desire to simplify, to give your belongings new homes, to pass on your treasures to someone who will love them next. You pick up a teacup and remember every conversation you ever had while holding it. You find an old scarf, still scented with a memory. You hold an old photograph and whisper a name that hasn't been spoken in years. And as you pack things away, you're not just sorting through objects. You're making room inside your soul, room for stillness, for clarity, for meaning. This isn't morbid. It's not giving up. It's not sadness. It's a kind of grace, a kind of preparing that the heart knows how to do. When the time is right, you might write letters, label old photos, create a small folder with important documents. Not because you expect the end, but because you want to leave behind ease for those you love. You want them to open the drawer one day and say, "She thought of everything. He made it easier for us." They left not just quietly, but kindly. This is your final act of love, a soft farewell that starts long before the last breath. And in doing so, you may find something unexpected, a lightness, a deep exhale, a feeling that you are putting your life in order, not out of fear, but from a place of quiet, holy completion. Because you're not just cleaning your closet, you're honoring your story. And every time you give something away, or write something down, or let something go, you're saying, I was here, this mattered, and now I'm ready for whatever comes next. And here's the beautiful thing. These quiet goodbyes, they're not endings. They are invitations to live the rest of your life more freely, with fewer distractions, less clutter, and more room for peace. So if you feel the urge to start organizing, to begin sorting, to slowly pass along pieces of your life, follow that instinct. It is not fear. It is readiness. It is the soul making space. And as you put the last box on the shelf, as you fold the last sweater, as you close the drawer, you may find yourself smiling, because you're not just preparing for goodbye. You are preparing for clarity, for simplicity, for grace, for whatever chapter may still come, clean, open, and full of light. 10. Asking fewer questions and listening to the wind. There was a time when you needed answers. You asked why the world worked the way it did. You searched for meaning, for clarity, for explanations. You looked for rules, formulas, advice, wanting to know how to live, how to love, how to avoid pain. But now, in your 70s, your 80s, something has changed. You ask fewer questions, and instead, you listen. You sit by the window and notice how the branches move. You feel the hush of early morning. You pause to watch the light shift across the floor, and it speaks to you, not in words, but in presence. This is one of the most profound transformations that happens with age. You begin to trust silence more than noise. You begin to sense that the greatest truths were never meant to be answered, only held. You no longer demand to know why everything happened, why someone left, why a door closed, why time moved the way it did. You simply let it be, and strangely, in that letting go, you feel more peace than you ever found in the answers. You stop trying to control what's next. You stop trying to win every argument or fix every misunderstanding. You stop chasing certainty, because now you're learning the art of being still. You hear the wind pass through the trees, and something inside you whispers, this is enough. Not because you've given up on life, but because you've finally entered into it fully. You see, in youth, we think the purpose of life is to understand everything, to name it, to solve it, to explain it. But as we grow older, we realize the sacredness is in the mystery, in not knowing, in watching the seasons turn, and simply being grateful we are still here to feel them. You ask less from the world, but feel more of it. You need less noise, but hear more music in the silence. And your questions, when they come, sound more like, isn't this morning light beautiful? Did you hear the birds today? Isn't it strange how much love we carry, even after all these years? These are not questions that need answers. They are offerings, open hands held out to life, to the divine, to the wind. And perhaps this is the final gift of aging. You no longer seek to master life. You seek to merge with it, to walk with it, to feel it moving through you like breath, like song, like prayer. You may not talk about it often, but in your heart, you've begun to live in rhythm with something much larger than yourself. And in that rhythm, you found peace. So if you find yourself speaking less, asking fewer questions, spending more time simply sitting, don't worry. You haven't grown distant. You've grown closer to truth, to time, to yourself. You're not fading. You're listening. And what you hear now is the whisper of everything that ever mattered. The wind, the stillness, the presence of love, not needing to be explained, only felt. If you're still here, still listening, then maybe something in these words touched a place you don't often speak of, a place where memories sit quietly, where aches are carried with grace, where the days stretch out like soft fabric, simple, slow, and sacred. These 10 things we've spoken about today, they may not be written in books or spoken of at family dinners, but they are real, deeply real. They are the quiet truths of aging, not dramatic, not loud, but quietly woven into your daily life. like the hum of a distant song you've always known. Avoiding mirrors, repeating stories, letting go of friendships without saying goodbye, declining invitations while still longing to go, feeling invisible, hiding pain, shrinking dreams, speaking less, tidying drawers and saying soft goodbyes, asking fewer questions but hearing the wind. These aren't flaws. These aren't failures. They are milestones, markers on the map of a life well lived. They tell a story, your story, of a soul that has traveled far, loved deeply, survived loss, and learned to listen not just with ears, but with the heart. And if no one else has said this to you today, let me be the one. You are not alone. You are not invisible. You are not finished. There is still something beautiful unfolding in you. Even now, especially now. So take a breath. Let yourself feel the softness of this moment. Let yourself be proud of all the quiet things you've carried without applause. The strength, the patience, the letting go. These are not the signs of fading. They are the signs of wisdom deepening. You don't need to fix anything. You don't need to go back in time. You don't need to rush forward. You are enough exactly as you are. Still becoming. Still growing in ways the world can't always see. And somewhere, in the space between these quiet truths, is a gentle invitation to keep living. Not louder, not harder, but softer, more honestly, to speak if you wish, to rest if you need, to dream, even now, because life is still here, and so are you. And that, dear soul, is more than enough.